Arrival on HFY. The shuttle door hissed open with a sharp metallic sound. A gust of dry, alien air rushed in, carrying the scent of ancient stone and something Ethan Carter couldn't quite name. He took a step forward, his boots pressing against the dark, cracked surface of HFY, a planet shrouded in mystery and ancient legends. The ruins stretched far and wide, their towering pillars reaching for the violet sky, their surfaces covered in glowing symbols, a lost language that no one had been able to decode for centuries. This was why Ethan had come. He wasn't a soldier or a politician. He was an explorer, a man who had dedicated his life to unlocking the secrets of forgotten worlds. As he adjusted his gear, a sharp voice cut through the air. A human. Here. What a joke. Ethan turned to see a tall, elegant figure standing at the edge of the ruins. Alara, a Syrian noble, stood with her arms crossed, her silver-blue eyes full of amusement. She was draped in the traditional warrior robes of her people, her violet skin glowing slightly under the twin suns. Around her, several other Xyrians watched Ethan with skeptical expressions. "Let me guess," Alara smirked. "You think you can unlock our ancient technology. Humans always believe they are special. You will fail, just like the others." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He had dealt with aliens like Alara before, arrogant, proud, convinced that their species was superior. But he wasn't here for an argument. He was here for answers. "Maybe," he said finally, strapping his scanner to his belt. "But I won't know unless I try." Alara let out a short laugh. "Try all you want, human. The ruins will never respond to you." Ignoring her, Ethan stepped closer to the main structure. The symbols on the stone pulsed faintly, reacting to the presence of a living being. He ran his fingers over them, feeling the grooves, the ancient craftsmanship. His mind worked quickly, matching patterns, looking for something, anything, that stood out. The Xyrians murmured among themselves, their whispers filled with amusement. Alara watched with folded arms, shaking her head. "Our scholars have spent centuries studying this place," she said. "And you think you'll solve its mystery in minutes?" Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a small metallic pendant, a relic he had found years ago on an abandoned space station. He had never understood why, but something about this place felt connected to it. As he held the pendant close to the ancient symbols, the ruins trembled. The laughter around him stopped instantly. Alara's smirk vanished. A deep hum echoed through the air, and the symbols began to glow brighter, pulsing with energy. Ethan felt a strange warmth travel up his fingers, spreading through his arm, like the ruins were responding to him. Alara's eyes widened. "What did you just do?" Ethan turned to face her. "I thought you said I would fail." The ground beneath them shuddered, and a low mechanical voice, ancient and powerful, rumbled through the ruins. "Identity confirmed. The hair has returned." Silence fell. The Xyrians stared in shock. Alara, for the first time, looked genuinely afraid. Ethan exhaled, watching as a hidden doorway began to open within the ruins, revealing a chamber no one had ever seen before. Alara took a cautious step back. This is impossible." But Ethan only smiled. "Maybe for you." The impossible activation. Alara stood frozen, her violet skin paler than before. The deep, ancient voice echoed through the ruins, its words shaking the air itself. "Identity confirmed. The hair has returned." For a moment, nobody moved. The Syrian scholars, once so certain of their knowledge, stood speechless, their golden robes rustling in the dry wind. The guards placed their hands on their weapons, uncertain whether they should fear the human standing before them or the ruins that had just spoken. Ethan Carter didn't know what had just happened either, but his heart pounded as he watched the ancient doorway open before him. A hidden passage had revealed itself, a place that had been sealed for thousands of years. Alara's shock quickly turned to anger. "This is some kind of trick," she snapped, stepping forward. The ruins belong to the Xyrians. Only we can access them. Ethan raised an eyebrow, glancing at the still glowing symbols beneath his hand. Then why did they respond to me? Alara's fists clenched. She turned to the elders, seeking some kind of explanation, but they were just as lost as she was. Impossible, one of them whispered. For centuries, the ruins remained silent. Even our most powerful scholars failed to unlock its secrets. And now, a human. The tension in the air was thick, but Ethan wasn't about to waste time arguing. He turned his gaze back to the passage. Darkness stretched beyond the doorway, the scent of dust and old metal filling the air. The glow from the ruins barely reached inside. Whatever was beyond this threshold had been untouched for generations. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. Alara's eyes widened. Wait, you can't just. But he didn't stop. If the ruins were responding to him, then he had to find out why. Inside the hidden chamber. The moment Ethan crossed the threshold, the walls lit up. Golden energy pulsed through the stone, revealing intricate carvings covering the chamber from floor to ceiling. His eyes widened as he scanned the images. They weren't just Syrian carvings. They depicted humans. Side by side with Syrians. Ethan moved closer, his fingers brushing over the detailed engravings. The images told a story, one of unity, of shared knowledge. But something changed halfway through. The peaceful scenes of humans and Syrians working together turned into scenes of conflict, of war, of something being erased. His stomach twisted. History had been rewritten. Behind him, Alara finally forced herself to move. She stepped inside, her breath catching as she took in the carvings. Her confidence shattered. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible. Humans were never part of our history." Ethan turned to her, his voice calm but firm. "Looks like someone wanted to make sure you never knew the truth." Alara shook her head. "No, these must be forgeries." But there was no denying the age of the carvings. They had been here for millennia. Before she could argue further, the room shook violently. A deep rumbling filled the air, and Ethan barely had time to react before the ground split open beneath them. He grabbed the edge of a stone pillar as dust exploded into the air. Alara let out a startled cry, stumbling backward. Ethan's instincts kicked in. Without thinking, he lunged forward and grabbed her wrist, pulling her to safety. She stared at him, wide-eyed, her breath shaky. For a moment, the arrogance in her expression was completely gone, but there was no time to think about that. In the center of the chamber, a massive mechanical structure began to rise from the ground. It was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. A towering machine covered in the same ancient symbols that had responded to him before. And then, suddenly, it turned on. Alara gasped as golden light filled the room, forming into a massive holographic figure standing before them. A guardian. It had no face, only a swirling mass of energy where a head should be. Its voice rumbled through the chamber like thunder. "The blood of the Forgotten One flows through you." Ethan tensed. "What does that mean?" The guardian did not answer immediately. Instead, it lifted a massive hand. And Ethan suddenly felt something pulling at his mind, like memories that weren't his were trying to surface. Alara staggered back, shaking her head. This is wrong. Humans are not part of our legacy." The guardian turned its glowing gaze toward her. The past was altered. The truth was buried. And now, the hair has returned to claim what was lost. Silence fell over the chamber. Ethan clenched his fists, his mind racing. If what this guardian was saying was true, then this wasn't just some random ancient ruin. This was something bigger, something no one had ever told him. And the Xyrians, they had been living a lie for thousands of years. The hidden chamber. Ethan Carter stood frozen, his breath shallow as the towering guardian loomed over him. The air inside the chamber crackled with ancient energy, filling the space with an eerie golden glow. The mechanical being's hollow eyes bore into him, its deep voice still echoing through the chamber. The past was altered. The truth was buried. And now, the hair has returned to claim what was lost. Alara's breathing was unsteady. She had always believed that the Xyrians were the sole heirs of their civilization's grand legacy. But now, everything she had been taught was crumbling before her eyes. She turned to Ethan, disbelief and frustration roaring within her expression. This must be a mistake. Humans were never part of our history. Our ancestors built these ruins, not yours. Ethan exhaled slowly, still trying to process what was happening. He had never considered himself part of something greater. He was just an explorer, a wanderer in the vastness of space. But now, an ancient machine was telling him he had a connection to a civilization lost in time. Before he could respond, the Guardian raised its massive, energy-filled hand. A flash of golden light burst forward, wrapping around Ethan like ghostly tendrils of electricity. His mind burned. Suddenly, he wasn't in the chamber anymore. Visions of the forgotten past. Ethan saw flashes, images from a time long before the present. A vast city filled with towering structures that stretched into a golden sky. Xyrians and humans walking side by side. There was no war, no arrogance, no division. They worked together, creating technology that could alter planets, harnessing energy beyond imagination. Then the vision shifted. Flames, destruction, betrayal. Ethan watched as the city burned. Something had gone horribly wrong. The Xyrians in the vision turned against the humans. He saw a council of robed figures, their expressions cold and ruthless. "Erase them from history," one of them commanded. Ethan's chest tightened as he saw the humans being banished, their contributions wiped from records. And then, darkness. The vision ended, and Ethan collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. His mind felt like it had just been shattered and reassembled. Alara rushed forward instinctively but stopped herself just a step away. "Ethan, what did you see?" Her voice, for the first time, wasn't filled with mockery or arrogance. It was hesitant, uncertain. He lifted his head, eyes burning. "You were wrong, Alara. We were part of this, and your people erased us." Alara took a shaky step back. No, that's not true." But deep down, she knew she had no way to prove him wrong. The carvings, the Guardian, the visions, everything pointed to a truth that had been deliberately hidden. The Guardian's final warning. The massive Guardian lowered its hand, the golden glow around Ethan fading. The machine's deep voice boomed again, shaking the chamber. "The cycle of deception has continued for too long. The hair must reclaim what was lost, or all will be destroyed." Ethan's heart pounded. "Destroyed? What do you mean?" The Guardian's light flickered slightly, its ancient body groaning under the weight of time. "The knowledge your ancestors created was never meant to be erased. The Xyrian Council feared what they did not understand, and in doing so, they doomed themselves. The technology they buried was not just power, it was balance. Without it, this world is collapsing. The core of HFY is unstable. It has already begun." Ethan's stomach twisted. "You're saying this planet is going to fall apart?" The Guardian's hollow eyes bore into him. "Unless the hair restores the lost knowledge, HFY will perish." A wave of dread settled over the chamber. Alara's face went pale. That's impossible. Our scientists would have known." The Guardian turned to her, its energy pulsating. "Your leaders knew. They hid the truth, believing the destruction would never come in their lifetime. But the time has run out." A heavy silence filled the chamber. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. He had come here seeking knowledge, but now he was holding the fate of an entire planet in his hands. Alara stared at him, her expression conflicted. For the first time, the arrogance was completely gone. "If this is true, then we don't have much time." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. He didn't know what kind of knowledge was hidden here, or how he was supposed to restore something that had been erased for centuries. But one thing was certain: He had to find out. And fast. The truth about the ancients. The chamber felt heavier than before, as if the very air had absorbed the weight of history. The guardian's voice still echoed in Ethan's mind. The knowledge your ancestors created was never meant to be erased. Without it, this world is collapsing. Ethan Carter rubbed his temples, still feeling the aftershocks of the visions forced into his mind. The images of a united past, humans and Syrians working together, clashed violently with the reality before him. Alara stood across from him, her violet skin pale, her once arrogant demeanor shattered. She had spent her whole life believing humans were inferior, that their role in galactic history was insignificant. But the carvings, the Guardian's words, and Ethan's reaction, they all told a different story. She took a hesitant step forward. This can't be true. If our ancestors erased humans from history, then why? What were they so afraid of? Ethan exhaled sharply. That's what I need to find out. The chamber's secret path. The walls of the chamber shifted, ancient gears grinding beneath the surface. A new passage revealed itself, a dark, spiraling tunnel leading deeper into the ruins. The Guardian's hollow eyes flared. The truth lies within. Ethan hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward. Alara, despite everything, followed him. As they moved down the dimly lit corridor, the walls around them pulsed with faint energy, activating more carvings. Ethan ran his hand over them, his fingers brushing against the stone. Not just Syrian figures, but humans too. Alara's breath hitched. They weren't just allies. They were equals. Ethan nodded, his mind racing. Something changed. And whatever it was, the Syrians decided to wipe it out completely. As they moved deeper, the air grew colder. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of energy coursing through the ruins. Then, a door stood before them, massive, sealed shut, marked with symbols neither of them had seen before. Only the rightful heir may enter. The Guardian's voice rumbled from behind them. Ethan glanced at Alara. Well, I guess that's me. She said nothing, her expression unreadable. Ethan placed his palm against the stone door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a powerful shockwave of energy burst outward, nearly knocking them off their feet. The door rumbled and slid open. Inside, the room was bathed in golden light. At its center stood a massive holographic archive, an ancient rotating sphere covered in pulsing glyphs, glowing with unreadable data. Alara gasped. This is a memory vault. Ethan narrowed his eyes. A what? She turned to him, eyes wide. It's an ancient technology, capable of storing entire histories. If this still works, it could hold the entire record of what really happened to your people. The buried truth. Ethan didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, placing his hand on the console beneath the floating archive. Immediately, the room came to life. Holograms flickered into existence, scenes of the past playing out before them. At first, they saw a golden age, humans and Syrians working together, building colossal structures, harnessing the energy of stars. The cooperation between their species had led to advancements that no other civilization had achieved. But then, the betrayal began. A council of Syrian elders stood before an unseen audience. Their expressions were dark, filled with fear. The humans have become too powerful, one of them said. They have unlocked technology even we do not fully understand. Another elder stepped forward. If we continue this alliance, they will surpass us. The crowd murmured in agreement. Then came the final command. Erase them. Ethan clenched his jaw as the next images played. The humans were betrayed. Their records were wiped. Their contributions stolen. Their very existence reduced to whispers of myths and forgotten ruins. And finally, one last message. A human figure, recorded centuries ago, stood before the archive. His face was tired, his eyes filled with sorrow. If you are watching this, then the cycle has continued. The truth was buried, but not forever. We knew this day would come. His gaze hardened. The Xyrians feared us, but they never understood. We were not their rivals. We were their only hope. Then the recording ended. The breaking point. Silence. Ethan slowly turned toward Alara. Still think we were never part of your history. Alara looked sick, her hands clenched into fists. They lie to us. The realization hit her harder than she had expected. Everything she believed in was a fabrication. She turned back to Ethan, her voice shaking. If this is true, then what do we do now? Ethan took a slow breath. The planet is dying. The Guardian said we need to restore what was lost. He looked back at the archive. Somewhere in here, there must be something we can use. But before either of them could make a move, the alarms blared. The room shook violently. Dust rained from above. The walls pulsed with red warning lights. A voice echoed through the chamber. But it wasn't the Guardian. It was Xyrian military frequency. Unauthorized access detected. The human has violated sacred grounds. Terminate him immediately. Alara's breath hitched. No, not now. Ethan's eyes darkened. He grabbed his weapon from his belt, his stance tense. They weren't going to let him walk away from this alive. Alara turned to him, her gaze conflicted. We have to go. Now. Ethan didn't argue. He backed away from the archive as the ground trembled beneath them. The truth had been revealed. Now they just had to survive long enough to do something about it. Betrayal and desperation. The chamber trembled violently as the alarm blared, the echoes bouncing off the ancient stone walls. The glowing holographic archive still hovered in the air, flickering slightly, as if it too was reacting to the danger. Ethan's mind raced. They had found the truth, but now the Xyrian authorities knew they were here. Alara stood frozen for a moment, staring at the warning lights flashing across the chamber. The voice in the transmission had been unmistakable. Her own people had just declared Ethan an enemy. Her fists clenched. How could they be so blind? Ethan pulled his sidearm from his belt. He wasn't sure if it would do much against a full Xyrian military squad, but he wasn't about to go down without a fight. He turned to Alara, his voice steady but urgent. We need to move. Now. Alara snapped out of her daze, glancing at the archive one last time before nodding sharply. This way. She darted toward a side passage, Ethan close behind. They had barely reached the corridor when the first explosion hit. A deafening blast rocked the ruins. The walls groaned as dust and debris rained down from above, filling the air with choking clouds of smoke. The Xyrian forces were already here. The betrayal. As they ran, Alara pulled out a small communication device from her belt, flipping it open with shaking hands. She pressed a button, trying to reach the central Xyrian command. This is Alara. Stand down. You don't understand what you're doing. A harsh voice crackled through the comms, filled with contempt. We understand perfectly. You have been deceived by the human. Stand aside, or you will share his fate. Alara's blood turned cold. Her own people had just labeled her a traitor. Ethan noticed the look on her face. Let me guess, not the response you were hoping for. She clenched her jaw, shoving the communicator back into her belt. They won't listen. Ethan smirked grimly. Then I guess we do this the hard way. The sound of marching footsteps echoed through the corridors ahead. A squad of Xyrian soldiers, armed and armored, moved in, their weapons glowing with pulsing blue energy. They raised their rifles the moment they saw Ethan. Human, surrender now. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed Alara's wrist and yanked her sideways, diving behind an ancient pillar just as a barrage of plasma fire erupted through the air. The blast struck the stone, sending chunks of debris flying in every direction. Alara's eyes widened. Are they insane? They're firing inside a sacred ruin. Ethan gritted his teeth. Yeah, well, I don't think sacred means much when they're trying to kill me. He peeked around the corner, quickly analyzing the soldiers' positions. There were too many to fight head-on. Alara exhaled sharply, her mind racing. There's another exit, but we have to reach the lower levels. Then we better start running. The desperate escape. They sprinted through the ruins as plasma bolts tore through the air behind them. The energy blasts struck ancient stone, sending shards of debris flying past their heads. Ethan kept pace with Alara, his instincts sharp. He had been in bad situations before, but this was on a whole new level. The corridors twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the ruins. The architecture changed as they moved. The walls were now covered in sleek, polished metal rather than ancient stone. Ethan frowned. This place is different. Alara didn't slow down. This must be one of the lower research levels. If the Syrians erased human history, this is where they would have hidden any surviving records. Ethan's pulse quickened. More secrets. They didn't have time to stop and look, but if this place had been sealed off for centuries, there was no telling what other knowledge had been buried here. A sudden tremor shook the ruins, not from the battle, but from something deep below. The Guardian's voice boomed through the chamber again, distorted and flickering. Warning. Structural integrity failing. Core destabilization imminent. Alara skidded to a stop. What? Ethan swore under his breath. The Guardian said the planet was unstable. If these ruins collapse. Alara turned, realization dawning in her eyes. Then everything here, every secret, every record, will be lost forever. For a split second, neither of them moved. Then a new sound reached their ears, the low hum of approaching engines. They turned toward the distant archway, just in time to see a massive Syrian dropship descend into the ruins, its heavy doors sliding open. Reinforcements. Ethan let out a sharp breath. Well, that's just great. Alara gritted her teeth. They're not giving us a choice. Ethan checked his weapon. Only a few shots left. Not enough to fight off an entire squad. He turned to Alara. Tell me there's another way out. Alara hesitated. Then, her expression hardened. There is, but it's dangerous. Ethan smirked. Everything about today has been dangerous. Lead the way. The last chance. Alara guided Ethan toward a side passage, a hidden access tunnel buried beneath the ruins. If we can reach the control center, she said between breaths, we might be able to trigger an emergency lockdown. It'll buy us time. Ethan raised an eyebrow. And if we fail? Alara exhaled. Then we die along with these ruins. No pressure. They moved fast, dodging collapsing debris and enemy fire. The Syrian forces were relentless, pursuing them through the corridors, but Ethan and Alara had one advantage. The ruins were unstable. The ground suddenly cracked beneath them. A massive fissure split the hallway apart, and the air filled with the roar of rushing wind as the lower levels began to cave in. Ethan barely managed to grab onto the edge, his fingers digging into the stone. He looked up, seeing Alara reaching out toward him. Ethan. With a final push, she grabbed his arm and hauled him to safety. They both collapsed onto the ground, breathing hard. You saved me, Ethan muttered, surprised. Alara rolled her eyes. Don't get used to it. He grinned despite himself. Too late. But they weren't safe yet. The structure continued to shake, and the Syrian soldiers were still closing in. They had only one shot left to turn things around, and they were running out of time. The awakening of the Guardian. The entire ruin was falling apart. The ground beneath them cracked open in violent tremors, sending deep fissures across the ancient stone. Walls that had stood for thousands of years were now collapsing in massive chunks, their once glowing symbols flickering weakly before vanishing into darkness. Ethan Carter wiped the sweat and dust from his face, his breathing ragged. He and Alara had barely survived the last collapse. The Syrian forces were still in pursuit, and now they had an even bigger problem. The ruins were on the verge of total destruction. The Guardian had warned them, but now the truth was undeniable. Tyra 9 was dying. Alara stood beside him, her violet skin pale under the dim glow of the crumbling ruins. Her breath was unsteady, her gaze locked on the unstable core pulsing beneath them, visible through the massive cracks in the ground. Energy surged through the exposed veins of the planet, flickering wildly like a dying heartbeat. "The planet is collapsing," Ethan muttered, watching as ancient machinery sparked and failed around them. "If we don't stop this now, everything, including us, is going down with it." Alara clenched her jaw, torn between everything she had believed and what was happening right in front of her. She had spent her life being taught that humans were nothing, a lesser species, unworthy of their legacy. But now, a human was the only one capable of saving what was left of their civilization. She looked at Ethan, her pride shattered, but her determination stronger than ever. "What do we need to do?" Ethan hesitated for only a moment. Then he made his choice. "We wake the Guardian." The descent into the core. Alara's eyes widened. "That's insane. The Guardian's already unstable. If we push it too far, then we die anyway." Ethan shot back. "Look around you. This place has minutes left before it collapses. The Guardian said we had to restore the lost knowledge. Maybe, just maybe, it can stabilize the planet." For once, Alara had no argument. She exhaled sharply and nodded. "Then let's move." They sprinted through the ruins, dodging falling debris and navigating the maze of crumbling corridors. Behind them, the sounds of Tyrian forces grew distant. Even they were now scrambling to escape the destruction. The corridor suddenly opened up into a massive underground chamber. Ethan skidded to a stop. Alara gasped. There it was, a colossal mechanical construct, partially buried beneath the ruins, surrounded by swirling energy conduits that pulsed weakly. The ancient Guardian, the last surviving relic of a civilization that had once spanned the stars. But it was damaged, its once powerful energy fading. If they were going to wake it up, they had to act fast. Ethan ran toward the central control panel, a massive circular console covered in alien symbols. He pressed his hand against it, hoping, praying, that whatever had responded to him before would still work. A deep hum resonated through the chamber. The Guardian's hollow eyes flickered, its massive form groaning as it began to stir. Ancient gears turned, energy conduits surged back to life, and dust cascaded from the towering structure as it rumbled awake. HFY, so unfirmed. The voice was deeper now, strained, as if the Guardian itself was barely holding together. The ruins trembled even harder, reacting to the energy being restored. Ethan's pulse quickened. "Guardian, you said the core was destabilizing. Can you stop it?" For a long, tense moment, the Guardian didn't respond. Then, its flickering eyes locked onto Ethan. "Coercion. Stabilization is possible. However, sacrifice is required." Alara stiffened. "What sacrifice?" The Guardian turned to Ethan, its glowing circuits reflecting in his wide eyes. "The power source required to restore balance is you." Silence. Alara's heart stopped. Ethan took a step back, confusion and dread washing over him. "Wait, what the hell does that mean?" The Guardian's voice rumbled through the chamber. "The ancient energy locked within your body hold these the key to articulation. Your presence is lost, but TUFFUL will restore the core. You must be part of it." Ethan's blood ran cold. "You're saying I have to, what, die?" Alara stepped forward, shaking her head violently. No, that can't be the only way." The Guardian's energy flickered dangerously. "There is no alternative. Without sacrifice, This world will perish. Elara turned to Ethan, her breathing ragged. We'll find another way. We have to. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the Guardian, at the flickering ruins around him, at the dying core of a planet that had kept its secrets buried for thousands of years. He had spent his entire life searching for answers. Now he had them. And if he didn't do something, they would be lost forever. Elara's voice broke through his thoughts. Ethan, please. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled. You know, I never planned to be a hero. Elara's eyes widened. No, you don't have to do this. Ethan's smirk didn't fade. Yeah, I kinda do. Before she could stop him, he stepped forward. Let's fix this. He placed both hands on the central control panel. The Guardian roared to life. Golden energy surged through the ruins, blasting upward like a storm, filling every crack, every fissure, every broken part of the dying world. The very planet trembled, but now it wasn't collapsing. It was stabilizing. Elara screamed his name. But the last thing Ethan saw was the world finally coming back to life. The shocking revelation. Golden energy exploded outward, illuminating the ruins like a dying star's final blaze before rebirth. Ethan Carter stood at the center of it all, hands pressed against the ancient control panel, feeling every nerve in his body burn like fire. The Guardian's power coursed through him, raw and untamed. His mind stretched across the ruins, across the very foundation of HFY itself. He felt the broken core of the planet, the ancient wounds left behind when the Xyrian Council erased human history, when they buried the very technology that had once stabilized this world. Elara watched in horror. Ethan, stop. You don't have to do this. But he wasn't listening. Because, in that moment, he finally understood everything. The truth no one was meant to know. The Guardian's energy wrapped around Ethan's mind, filling it with one last vision. He saw the past unfold before him, more vivid than any hologram. Thousands of years ago, humans and Xyrians had been equals. They weren't just allies. They had built HFY together. The entire planet had once been a shared effort, a beacon of unity, powered by a special energy source, a fusion of human and Xyrian DNA. That was why the Guardian had called Ethan the Hare. Humans had been the key to stabilizing HFY's core. But the Xyrian leadership, driven by fear and jealousy, had made a terrible decision. Erase them. The Xyrians rewrote history, cutting out the humans entirely. They convinced their own people that HFY was theirs alone, that humans were insignificant. But by doing so, they doomed the planet. Without human energy in the system, the planet's core had become unstable. It had been failing ever since, slowly dying over the millennia. The Xyrian leadership knew the planet was collapsing, but they kept the truth hidden, hoping it wouldn't happen in their lifetime. Until now. And now, Ethan was the only one who could fix it. The final memory burned into his mind. An ancient human scientist, long forgotten, leaving behind a message encoded in the Guardian. One day, our descendants will return, and when they do, they will either save this world or watch it crumble. Ethan gasped as the vision shattered. He knew what he had to do. The final choice. The Guardian's booming voice echoed in the chamber. The core is ready for stabilization. Commencing final phase. The ground shook violently, as if the entire planet had been waiting for this moment. The energy around Ethan surged to its peak. Elara rushed forward, grabbing his arm. No, there has to be another way. Ethan turned to her. For the first time since meeting her, she wasn't looking at him with arrogance or mockery. She was afraid. Afraid of losing him. Ethan, please, her voice cracked. There has to be another way. His heart clenched. For a moment, he almost hesitated. But then, another tremor shook the ruins. The entire chamber split apart, revealing the raging storm of unstable energy beneath them. They were out of time. Ethan smiled, a sad but determined smile. If I don't do this, everything we found, everything we fought for, will be lost. Alara's grip tightened. Then we'll find another way together. But Ethan knew there was no time left. He gently pulled her hands away and took a step back toward the control panel. Tell my people the truth. His voice was steady. Tell them who they really are. Alara shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. No, don't you dare. Ethan turned back to the Guardian. Do it. The Guardian's eyes flared with blinding light. The energy surged through Ethan's body, tearing through every fiber of his being. He felt himself disintegrating into pure energy, his consciousness stretching, merging with the ancient system itself. Alara screamed his name. And then, the new dawn. Silence. For the first time in centuries, Tyra 9's core stabilized. The chaotic tremors ceased. The collapsing ruins froze in place, then began to repair themselves. The golden veins of the planet, once fading, blazed back to life, strong and steady. Outside, the Syrian forces, the scholars, every living thing on the planet felt the change. The sky, once filled with dark storm clouds, cleared. The planet had been saved. 1 month later, Alara stood on the balcony of the restored ruins, gazing at the sunrise over HFY 9. The planet was thriving again, but at a terrible cost. Ethan was gone. Or at least, that's what they thought. The Guardian, now fully reactivated, had one final message for her. The HFY is not lowest. He exists beyond form. He exists in. Alara didn't understand what that meant, but deep in her heart she knew. Ethan Carter wasn't truly gone. He had become something more, something that would never be erased again. And this time, the truth would never be buried. The end.